They gave my room to their adopted daughter while I was still living in the house. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision, a clear, deliberate choice that I only discovered when I came home after a 14-hour shift, my uniform soaked in sweat and my fingers aching from hauling crates all day. I unlocked the front door, dropped my duffel bag on the floor like I always did, and froze. The door to my room was open, wide like an invitation. But inside, nothing was mine. The posters I'd collected since middle school? Gone. The books I stacked too high on the shelf? Gone. The bed I'd built myself out of reclaimed wood from the shop downtown? Vanished. In their place, stuffed animals, frilly curtains, and the overwhelming scent of vanilla body spray. I didn't understand at first. My body moved on instinct, stepping inside like maybe this was all a dream or some twisted prank. But then I saw her, Marcella, sitting cross-legged on what used to be my bed, painting her nails like she'd always belonged there. Like it hadn't even crossed her mind that someone else once called this space their sanctuary. "Hey Joshua," she said without even looking up. "Hope you don't mind. Your mom said you wouldn't care." I stood in the doorway, chest tight, the world shrinking down to the soft pink walls and the distant sound of my mother laughing in the kitchen. I walked out without a word. My mother found me in the hallway 5 minutes later. Her face was calm, composed. Like this wasn't cruel. Like it was normal. It just made more sense, she said. "Marcella needed a room. You're never really home anyway." Never home? Because I worked 2 jobs to help pay the bills? Because I gave up every weekend to fix the plumbing or replace the rotten boards on the porch. They never noticed? I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just went to the basement, found my things shoved in ripped boxes next to the washing machine, and packed what I could into a single bag. As I walked past Marcella's new room, my room, she didn't even look up. She was already home, and I was already gone. I used to believe that hard work was the only language people needed to understand. That if you showed up, day after day, stayed quiet, did what was asked, and didn't cause trouble, you'd earn respect, maybe even love. That's what I told myself growing up in that house. That was my lie, and I lived by it like a creed, even when the evidence kept proving me wrong. I'm Joshua, oldest by blood, invisible by choice, not mine, but theirs. I don't have a sob story about being abandoned or beaten. Nothing dramatic like that. Just a long, slow erosion of value. A quiet kind of neglect that no one notices until it eats through your foundation. My parents never yelled at me. They didn't need to. Silence can bruise deeper than fists when you're a kid desperate to be seen. From as early as I can remember, I was the one who fixed things. The one who changed light bulbs, patched drywall, took the bus alone to get groceries when dad was passed out and mom had a headache. I didn't mind. I liked being needed. That was my currency, usefulness. And for a long time, I thought it meant something. Then Marcella came. They told me it was temporary. A foster placement until they figured things out. A scared girl with nowhere to go. I was 17, 2 months away from graduation, already juggling work after school and saving every dollar like it might save my life. I nodded, said, sure, even helped move her suitcase upstairs. She was 12, quiet, skittish, always looking around like someone might yank the floor out from under her. I never blamed her for how things shifted. Not really. It wasn't her fault that my parents suddenly discovered how to smile at someone in the morning. It wasn't her fault that they remembered birthdays and made pancakes on Sundays and left little notes on the fridge that said, "We're proud of you." They just forgot I was still there. The first few weeks, I told myself it was just the novelty of someone new, that it would balance out. But months passed, then a year. Marcella was no longer temporary. She was family. She called my parents mom and dad, and me, I became Joshua, not brother, not son, just a placeholder who took up too much space. It was little things at first. Dinner portions a bit smaller for me, fewer questions about my day. My college application sitting unopened on the counter while Marcella's science fair ribbons got framed. Then came the room. I hadn't even known they were planning it. I thought the silence was just the usual indifference. But the night I came home and found my childhood gone, boxed up and shoved aside without a word, it all clicked. Marcella had her own room now. My room. Because apparently, she'd earned it by existing. Because I was never home anyway. Because my contributions were invisible. Because usefulness isn't love. When I stood in the hallway that night, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder, My mother barely looked up from her phone. My father didn't even come out of his room. No goodbye, no questions, not even a fake protest. Just the quiet understanding that I didn't matter enough to miss. Funny thing is, I didn't hate Marcella. Not then. She was a kid doing what she could to survive, same as I had. She clung to them like a raft in a storm, desperate to stay afloat. And they let her, loved her, chose her. It was the choosing that broke me, because every day I stayed, every hour I worked, every birthday I forgot to celebrate because I was too busy holding the pieces together. They still didn't choose me. They chose Marcella. They chose comfort, appearances, a girl with sad eyes and perfect timing. I walked out that night with a bag of clothes, $486 in a savings envelope, and no clue where I was going. But I knew I couldn't stay. Not in that house. Not in a place where dogs got more space than sons. I ended up at Butler's. He was my friend, though we rarely used that word. The kind of guy who didn't ask questions, just handed you his spare key and cleared a corner of the couch. He never pitied me, never prodded, just let me be, which was more kindness than I'd known in a long time. Butler and I had met working after school in a garage. He was a dropout with oil-stained hands and the sharpest business instincts I'd ever seen. He once flipped an old motorcycle in under 2 days and made more money than I made into months. People underestimated him, just like they did me. Maybe that's why we got along. He didn't talk about family much. I didn't either. But when he saw the look on my face that night, he didn't need details. He pointed to the fridge, the couch, and the bathroom and said, "Whatever's mine, you got it." That was more family than I'd ever received from the people who shared my last name. The next few weeks were a blur of exhaustion and silent planning. I worked, I saved, I watched Marcella's life unfold online like a stranger watching someone else live in their skin. My parents smiled next to her in photos, wearing matching shirts, holding her at family barbecues. I wasn't tagged in a single one. I stopped looking. Marcella had my room. She had their love. She had everything I never got. So I decided I'd take something too. Not out of hate, not out of vengeance, out of necessity. I would take back power, take back control, take back my worth. I wouldn't be their placeholder anymore. I'd be the name they never forgot. The real weight of betrayal isn't the action itself, it's the explanation you're given afterward. That moment when someone looks you in the eyes and pretends they don't know why you're hurting. When they act like their choices are just reasonable, and your pain is somehow irrational. That moment came 2 weeks after I'd left the house. I was back at the hardware store, sorting pallets in the loading bay, when I got a text from my mother. "You still have a few of your boxes in the basement. Can you come pick them up? They're in the way." No hello. No, how are you? No acknowledgement that I'd walked out of their lives with nothing but a duffel bag. Just a request to come clean up what was left of myself. I showed the message to Butler and he just shook his head. "You gonna go?" "I have to," I said, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I wanted to see with my own eyes that they hadn't noticed my absence. Or maybe I just wasn't ready to let go of the last thread that tied me to the idea of being their son. The basement door creaked the same way it always had. Damp, cold, with a light that flickered even though I'd replaced the bulb twice when I still lived there. My boxes were stacked next to the water heater, some torn open, a few wet from the leaking pipe above. My notebooks were ruined. One of my old trophies, a third-place science fair win from 8th grade, was broken in half, shoved beneath a mop. I stood there for a long time, not touching anything, just staring at what remained of the person I used to be. Forgotten, unloved, in the way. When I came upstairs, I found Marcella sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open. She was laughing at something on the screen, earbuds in, completely at home. Her hair was tied up with one of my old bandanas. She'd never asked to borrow it. My mother was pouring coffee. She glanced at me, not even startled. "Oh good, you came. Make sure you don't leave any trash down there. We're having guests over the weekend and I don't want the house looking like a storage unit." I didn't say a word. She took a sip from her mug. "You're doing okay, right? I mean, you haven't said much since you left." "You didn't ask," I said quietly. She shrugged. "Well, you left on your own." I looked at her then, really looked. At the face I used to search for approval. At the eyes that had once read bedtime stories. And I realized they didn't see me at all. They hadn't in years. "Why her?" I asked. My mother blinked. "What? Why did you give her my room?" Why not the basement? Or the spare? She needed a fresh start, she said. That room was full of old energy. And you? Well, you were always out. It made sense. I almost laughed. Right, because I was working, paying for groceries, fixing the pipes, covering Dad's credit card debt. Don't be dramatic. That was always her go-to line when I got close to the truth. As if being honest about pain was theatrical. As if betrayal only counted when it was loud. Marcella looked up then, finally noticing me. She pulled out one earbud. Oh hey Joshua, want some waffles? I made extra. She said it like we were friends, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't moved into my room and filled the air with her perfume and her laughter and her carefully curated sadness. Marcella had a way of making people want to protect her. She wore vulnerability like jewelry, just enough to catch the light, but it never felt real to me. Not like mine. No, I said, my voice like glass. I'm just here for my trash. She flinched at that, but said nothing. I turned to leave, but stopped at the door. One more thing, I said. Do you even know what happened to my guitar? My mother looked confused, like she didn't even remember I had one. Marcella spoke up. Oh, that? I think I sold it online. I needed a new webcam for school. Sorry, thought you'd left it. It was a cheap guitar, scratched. The frets were worn, but it had been mine since I was 13. The only thing that ever made me feel like I had a voice when no one listened. I nodded slowly. Yeah, that tracks. I left without another word, drove back to Butler's in silence. The city blurred past the windshield, but I wasn't really seeing it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the guitar, not because of its value, but because of what it symbolized. They hadn't just given away my space. They'd sold off my silence, cashed in my memories for convenience. That was the moment the last thread snapped. I wasn't going to ask for space anymore. I was going to own it, control it, redefine it. They'd given away my room, so I'd take their roof. Joshua's chest had never felt so tight. Every night when he returned to Butler's apartment, he tried to lie still on the worn couch, arms folded across his chest like he could keep everything from spilling out. But his mind didn't rest. It roared. Thoughts crashed into each other like waves, memories, doubts, moments he'd tried to forget. He'd stare at the ceiling, tracing the water stain in the corner, pretending it was a constellation guiding him somewhere better. But it wasn't. It was just a stain, just like what they'd left on his heart. Some nights, he'd dream of home. Not the real one, the one that never truly existed, but a version where his parents looked at him like he mattered, where Marcella stayed in the spare room and called him her brother without an edge in her voice. A version where his guitar sat safely on its stand, untouched. He'd wake up aching, his throat tight with emotions he never let himself name. At work, he smiled, he lifted, he nodded when customers barked out orders, apologized when he hadn't done anything wrong. He wore his exhaustion like armor, hoping it made him invisible enough to survive the day. But inside, he was unraveling, slowly, carefully, like thread slipping loose from a worn-out seam. There were moments when he caught himself staring at nothing, the world going quiet around him. People spoke, but their voices felt far away, like muffled echoes through glass. He'd clench his fists in his pockets, nails biting into his palms just to remind himself he was still here, still real, still Joshua. The worst part wasn't the anger. It wasn't even the loneliness. It was the doubt. What if they were right? What if he was forgettable, replaceable? Just a placeholder they'd tolerated until someone better came along? What if all the pain was something he deserved? It made him second-guess everything, every decision, every word. He'd find himself apologizing for things he hadn't done, flinching at kindness like it might be a trap. Even Butler's quiet acceptance sometimes felt too generous, too unreal. He didn't want pity. He wanted purpose. He needed to matter. Late one night, he sat on the apartment floor with a notebook open, pages filled with calculations, names, numbers and addresses, listings for properties in rough neighborhoods, buildings most people didn't want, buildings he could maybe, just maybe, afford if everything went perfectly, which it wouldn't, but still he tried. He stared at those numbers until his eyes blurred, until his hands trembled with fatigue. He told himself it wasn't foolish, that it wasn't desperation, that if he just held on a little longer, the pieces would start to shift. They had taken everything, his room, his guitar, even the illusion that family meant safety, but they Hadn't taken his will. Not yet. Every insult, every moment of silence, every time they chose Marcella over him, he folded it like fuel inside his chest. It was heavy, it burned, but it kept him standing. Joshua knew he wasn't healed. He wasn't strong. He wasn't even stable, but he had direction. And that was more than he'd ever had in that house. He looked at the cracked ceiling one last time and whispered into the dark, "I'm going to come back, and you're going to remember my name." It happened on a Wednesday, quiet, cloudy, nothing remarkable. Joshua was working the back register at the hardware store when Butler came in, his expression unreadable, holding his phone like it had bitten him. He didn't say anything right away, just walked behind the counter, ignored the confused customer in line, and shoved the phone toward Joshua. "Look." Joshua took the phone, brows tightening. The screen showed a post Marcella's Instagram. She was smiling in a photo, seated cross-legged on a bed, his old bed, the same wood he'd sanded himself, the same headboard he'd built with borrowed tools. Behind her, the wall he used to pin his sketches was now covered in fairy lights and motivational quotes. The caption said, "Fresh start in my forever room, couldn't be more grateful for this family." Joshua blinked once, then again. The likes were piling up, family, friends, his own cousins, even people from school. Comment after comment about how lucky she was, how sweet, how deserving. And then, he saw it, a reply under one of the comments. It used to be the older kid's room, but he moved out. He didn't really fit in. Joshua didn't feel the phone slide from his fingers onto the counter. Didn't hear Butler curse as it landed. His entire body had gone cold, still, as if all the air had been sucked out of the store. He didn't fit in. That was how they told it. That was the narrative now. Not that he had been shoved out. Not that he'd been replaced. That he just didn't belong. "They're rewriting it," he said flatly. Butler picked up the phone. She deleted the comment now, but someone screenshotted it. "It's going around." Joshua stared at the register lights, the rows of screwdrivers, the blinking overhead bulb. Everything felt detached, artificial, like a set in a play where he no longer had a role. He hadn't just been pushed out. They were erasing him. Marcella had turned his exile into a storyline. She was the innocent, the saved. He was the bitter brother who walked out and never looked back. And the world was buying it. He'd thought he could walk away quietly, build something, win with grace. But they weren't letting him be silent. They were dragging his name through sugar and polish, painting over the truth with pastel lies. That night, he sat at Butler's desk and pulled out every document he'd been working on: loan approvals, realtor emails, price negotiations on a building just 2 blocks from his old house. He wasn't going to just rise anymore. He was going to tower, and they were going to see every floor of what they'd built in him, every wound, every lie, every betrayal. He whispered to the empty room, "You made me invisible. Now watch what happens when I take up space." The papers were already signed when Joshua stepped out of the elevator. The contract was in his leather folder, crisp and final. The building, the one that included his childhood home, was his. No more negotiations. No more hypotheticals. The ink was dry. He owned it. Every cracked tile, every warped floorboard, every memory stained into the walls. He hadn't gone near the old neighborhood in months. Not since the day he took the eviction letters to the city clerk's office. Everything until now had been handled by property managers and lawyers. Detached, efficient, cold. But this part, the final visit, he needed to do himself. He parked a block away and walked the rest of the distance. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because of nerves, but because of the weight he'd carried for years. The sidewalks hadn't changed. The cracked pavement still stretched uneven beneath his feet. The crooked mailbox at the end of the street still leaned the same direction it always had. Time had moved, but the place hadn't. The house looked smaller than he remembered. The door had been repainted, a dull beige, as if trying to erase the fingerprints of the past. Weeds curled around the porch steps. The windows were closed, curtains drawn. There was no laughter, no warmth, just a shell trying to look whole. He knocked once, then again. It was Marcella who opened the door. Her eyes widened when she saw him, and in an instant, her polished calm cracked. Her expression flickered: confusion, surprise, and something else. Guilt, maybe, or fear. "Joshua," she said, voice hesitant, "tell them to come to the living room," he said. "All of them." Marcella didn't argue. She stepped back and disappeared into the hallway. He followed, his shoes landing softly on the floorboards he used to polish every weekend. While his parents watched TV with her, they were already seated when he entered. His father in the recliner, his mother on the edge of the sofa. Marcella stood off to the side, arms crossed, her eyes flicking between them all. No one spoke. Joshua looked around. The framed photo of Marcella's sweet 16 sat on the shelf, where his graduation photo used to be. A quilt one he remembered buying for his mother 3 birthdays ago was now folded neatly at Marcella's feet. The house didn't look like his anymore, but he still remembered every corner of it. He placed the folder on the coffee table, opened it, and laid the documents face up. "I own the building," he said. His mother blinked. "What?" He pointed to the line where his name was printed, bold and indisputable. "The building, this house, and every other unit on the block." His father leaned forward, squinting. "You're joking." "I'm not." The silence turned thick. Marcella's jaw clenched. His mother's lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. "You're being evicted," Joshua continued. "You've had months to get your payments in order. You haven't. So this is formal notice. You have 30 days. His mother stood up, voice trembling. "Joshua, you can't be serious. We raised you." "You raised me?" His voice didn't rise, but it hit hard. "Is that what you call what you did?" His father slammed his hand on the armrest. "You're punishing us because we gave a girl in need a place to stay?" "No," Joshua replied calmly. "I'm holding you accountable for forgetting you had a son in the process." Marcella finally stepped forward. "I didn't ask for any of that," she said, her voice sharper than before. "I didn't ask for your room, or for them to treat me the way they did. That wasn't my fault." He looked at her, really looked at her. The girl who had smiled so sweetly in his bed, worn his clothes, sold his guitar. The girl who'd taken everything and never once asked why it was so easy for them to give it. "No," Joshua said. "You didn't ask, but you never stopped them either. You just fit in where I was erased." Her lips pressed into a line. "You lived in my room. You wore my hoodie. You used my things. And when I walked out with nothing, not one of you came after me." His mother's voice broke. "We thought you needed space." "No," he said quietly. "You needed space. Space from guilt. Space from consequence. Space from remembering that you pushed your son out and called it balance." His father stood, fists clenched, face pale. "You think this makes you powerful?" Joshua turned to him. "No, it makes me free." Marcella spoke again, trying to steady her voice. "So what? You came back for revenge?" Joshua's eyes didn't leave hers. "No, came back for truth." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat pocket, a screenshot, printed in color. Marcella's comment, "He didn't really fit in." He held it up. "You rewrote me," he said. "Told people I just left, that I didn't fit, and the world believed it." "I didn't mean," she started. "You did. You meant every word. Because it was easier to make me small than admit you'd stepped into a space you never earned." His mother sank onto the sofa. Her hands trembled as she reached for the eviction papers, reading them slowly like they might somehow change. In her hands, "We can't afford to move," she whispered. Joshua nodded. "You should have thought about that when you had your fresh start." The weight of the room pressed down like a storm. No one moved. Finally, his father exhaled, the anger draining from his face. "What do you want, Joshua?" He paused. The words were right there. He could demand everything. The house, the room, their apologies, their shame. But what he really wanted was something none of them could give. "I want you to remember me," he said softly. "Not just as the boy who walked away, but as the one you pushed." He turned to leave, his footsteps echoing on the floor that had once been his. At the doorway, he paused. "One more thing," he said without turning. "You can stay in the basement, the space where you shoved my life in a pile of wet boxes. It's yours now." He walked out without looking back. Outside, the air was crisp, clean. The sky stretched wide above him, endless and clear. He didn't feel joy. He didn't feel revenge. What he felt was lighter. Like finally, the weight he'd carried for years had settled somewhere behind him, no longer strapped to his shoulders. It wasn't triumph. It was closure. He got in his car, placed the leather folder beside him, and started the engine. His phone buzzed once. A message from Butler. "You good?" Joshua stared at the screen, then typed 2 words. "It's done," and he meant it. Joshua didn't go back to the neighborhood for 3 weeks. He told himself he was busy meetings with architects, contractor bids, inspections on the new downtown property he'd just put an offer on. But in truth, he wasn't avoiding work. He was waiting for silence, waiting for the keys to be returned, for the basement to be emptied, for the last thread of his past to unravel quietly. And when his property manager finally called and said, "They're gone, left yesterday morning," keys were under the mat, he felt nothing, no thrill, no anger, no grief, just a deep, echoing stillness that settled into his bones like rest after a storm. He went back the next day. The front door opened with a slow creak, revealing the home he used to dream in, used to cry in, used to patch together with hope and quiet effort. It was empty now, hollow, clean in the way things feel when they've been abandoned, not cared for. His footsteps echoed as he walked room to room. The living room, once filled with Marcella's laughter, was silent. The kitchen where his mother used to make coffee was spotless, the cabinets empty. The hallway where he'd heard their voices whisper behind closed doors was still. No tension, no resentment, just air. And then, he stood in the doorway of what used to be his room. The paint Marcella had chosen was still on the walls, soft pink with floral decals in one corner, but the furniture was gone. The closet door hung slightly crooked, like someone had rushed to take everything without bothering to check if it was still whole. He stepped inside and looked around, breathing in a space that had once been stolen from him. Now it was his again. He didn't bother repainting it right away. No, he kept it as it was, a relic, a memory preserved in full color. He turned it into his office, a place where the heart of his business would live, where calls would be made, deals would be signed, futures would be shaped. Marcella's decals stayed on the wall deliberately, not because he wanted to remember her, but because he wanted to remember himself, the version of Joshua who stood in that doorway with a duffel bag and a broken heart, thinking he was disposable. He wanted to honor the boy who walked away with nothing and built everything. The neighborhood started changing within 6 months. Old brick walls were power washed and painted, broken sidewalks replaced. The corner store got a new owner, someone Joshua helped secure a small business grant for. The abandoned lot across the street became a community garden, with flower beds and benches and a mural painted by local teens. He didn't just rebuild the block, he redefined it. The residents whispered about the new landlord, young, professional, firm but fair. He never raised the rent without reason. He never tolerated disrespect. But he showed up when a pipe burst. He remembered names. He installed security cameras on his own dime and donated half the furniture for the new daycare that opened across from the elementary school. They respected him, even if they didn't know his full story. But one person did. It was a clear morning in early spring when Marcella showed up again. Joshua was standing outside the building, clipboard in hand, supervising the delivery of new windows for the complex across the street. He turned the moment he felt someone watching him. She hadn't changed much, still wearing her practiced softness like a shield, but now there were cracks. Her clothes weren't designer. Her makeup was smudged. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was a whisper. "I didn't think you'd actually do it." Joshua didn't answer. Marcella stepped closer. "You bought the whole block." He nodded. She looked around, almost in disbelief. "You really fixed it?" "No," he said flatly. "I built it." Her jaw tightened. "I just wanted to say, I didn't mean for it to go that far. I didn't know they'd treat you like that." "You didn't stop it either." Her silence confirmed what they both already knew. She swallowed. "They're staying in some rental, smaller place. It's been hard." "Good," he said. Her eyes widened, as if surprised he wasn't going to spare her one last kindness. But that part of him, the one that waited for validation, for apologies, for family, was gone. "You got everything you wanted, didn't you?" she asked bitterly. "No," Joshua replied, his voice steady. "I earned everything I needed." "That's the difference." She hesitated. "So this is it? You're never going to forgive them?" He met her eyes. "Forgiveness doesn't mean re-entry." She didn't reply, just nodded once tightly, then turned and walked down the street he now owned. He didn't watch her leave. A month later, the neighborhood hosted its first community block party. Joshua stood under the string lights with Butler at his side, watching kids run past, balloons bouncing in the air, music floating on warm wind. A woman in her 60s walked up to him, holding a clipboard. "You Joshua?" she asked. He nodded. "I'm Miss Caro. Used to live in the corner unit years ago. Had to move when it got bad, but I heard you fixed it. I just wanted to say thank you." Joshua smiled. Welcome back. That night, as the party dwindled and lights blinked off, one by one, he returned to his office, the room that used to be his. He sat at the desk, pulled out a file labeled Acquisitions Phase 2, and stared at the next set of buildings he planned to buy. But before diving into numbers and notes, he opened a separate folder. Inside, a single photo. Him. A T14, standing in front of the house, face sunburned from working on the porch, holding his guitar like it was armor. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't broken either. He framed that photo and set it on the desk, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of where it all began. Final line: they gave my room to someone else, thinking I'd disappear. So I bought the building, rewrote the story, and made sure they'd never forget who I was, what they did, and the empire they built for me without knowing it.